corner play by Barbosa. And here is Nash being chased.
Let's just stop it right there. Now, the events that are about to unfold here would turn out to be a very crucial turning point in the series. As some of you guys might know, the Spurs are about to execute a very dirty play against the Phoenix Suns. And so you would think that because Phoenix was on the receiving end of this intentional cheap shot, that obviously things would go in their favor, and it would end up being very beneficial on their part, right? But actually, this moment that initially had the Suns looking like the innocent victims would end up having the opposite effect on their team, and might have been the very thing that decided the entire outcome. Usually, when the topic of NBA playoff series that possibly could have been rigged gets brought up, most people are quick to mention the infamous 2002 Western Conference Finals that featured the LA Lakers and the Sacramento Kings. But today, we're going to be taking a look at the 2007 Western Conference semifinals between the San Antonio Spurs and the Phoenix Suns. A series that might have went over some of your heads when it comes to the possibility that it could have been fixed. The 06-07 NBA season featured a handful of powerhouse teams. In fact, the top 3 teams were all in the West, which set up a very intriguing playoffs for the fans. That year, the Spurs had a very successful season, with Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili doing what they usually do. They won 58 games, which placed them 3rd in the West. Now Phoenix, led by Nash, Marion, Barbosa, who was the 6th man of the year, along with Amar'e Stoudemire, who just came back right in time from knee surgery, but claimed that he felt better than he ever did, would have one of their best seasons ever, racking up a total of 61 wins, earning them the number 2 seed in the West. So who had the number 1 seed? Well, that was the Dallas Mavericks, who had the MVP Dirk Nowitzki and had the best record out of everybody in the entire league with 67 victories. And the way the standings were looking, it was almost a sure thing that we were going to witness a bloodbath in the conference finals. But of course, we all know what happened next. The 8th seeded Golden State Warriors would pull off a massive upset in the first round, knocking off the Mavs in 6 games. But obviously, both the Suns and Spurs didn't care at all, as it made their path much easier going forward. The Suns would handle business pretty easily in the first round by defeating the Lakers in 5 games. And as for the Spurs, they also made it quick, defeating the Nuggets in 5 games. Then, that meant the 2 teams that hated each other, Phoenix and San Antonio, would face off in the semifinals. With the Mavs out and no longer a threat, Steve Nash knew that all he had to do was get past San Antonio in order to finally win a championship to go along with his back-to-back MVPs. Because the other bracket that had Golden State and Utah was much weaker. Everyone knew that this was the real conference finals, and they felt that nobody in the East could really compete with them. The series would begin in Phoenix, and right out of the gate, you can sense that we were in for an epic matchup. Game 1 was full of excitement. The score remained close pretty much the entire game. Parker and Duncan were deadly, basically putting the whole team on their backs, while Nash and Stoudemire were trying everything in their power to stay in the game. But then, with just under 3 minutes left in the 4th quarter, the Suns down by just 1 point, Parker and Nash would collide heads. Both were shaken up, but Nash got the worst of it. His nose became a bloody mess, and according to NBA rules, he was bleeding so excessively that he was forced to sit on the bench for the remainder of the game, and had no other choice but to watch his team collapse in the final minute, as San Antonio would take advantage and claim a 1-0 lead in the series. And who knows what would have happened had they gained control of Nash's bloody nose. But fortunately for them, they would bounce back in Game 2 in a huge way, blowing the Spurs out by 20 points to even up the series 1-1. Then, they headed to San Antonio for Game 3, and this is where some controversy would be involved. Many people say that this was easily the worst officiated game in the entire series, as the majority of the calls would go the Spurs' way, especially in the fourth quarter. Some of those calls had people scratching their head with confusion. Even Bill Simmons couldn't hold back his feelings on the game. Quote, "Congratulations to Greg Willard, Tim Donaghy, and Eddie Rush for giving us the most atrociously officiated game of the playoffs so far." And in the days following Game 3, the Suns fans were understandably outraged, but quickly had to get over it and move on to the next game. Which takes us to Game 4. With San Antonio up 2-1, they were looking to put a stranglehold on the series, and it looked like it was heading that way until the Suns managed to pull themselves together to take the lead in the fourth quarter. And then, with less than 20 seconds left in the game, Suns up by 3, Robert Horry had no problem expressing his frustration.
And it's tipped to the corner, played by Barbosa. And here is Nash being chased, and they had him all looking out. As Horry sent Nash flying, and Bell goes at Horry. Nash got up, he wants to go at Horry. The Suns did not appreciate the foul by Robert Horry.
Horry hip checks Steve Nash, which sent him flying into the scores table. Okay, I'm sure some of you are thinking that it looked like Nash might have exaggerated just a little bit, but still, the Spurs were only down 3, so in my opinion, it was completely uncalled for. And obviously, it was enough to make Nash's blood boil as chaos broke out. After the game, when things finally calmed down, you can see that Nash was in a pretty good mood. Considering his team just tied up the series 2 games apiece, he was even cracking some jokes.
Robert Horry has made a lot of big shots in his career. Some may say that was a cheap shot towards the end there when he forearmed you into the table.
Good one.
What is your impression of what happened?
Well, you know, he just body checked me out of bounds. I mean, I understand he's frustrated. It happens. You know, I'm sorry it happened to him, but I mean, he did body check me.
You bounced up pretty quick. Looked like you wanted to go after him.
Well, you know, I've been working on the guns a little bit, so a couple combos might have landed some points to the body.
And one of the main reasons Steve Nash probably had a smile on his face was because he knew that more than likely Robert Horry would get what was coming to him. Everyone knew he was inevitably going to get suspended for his actions, which he did for 2 games. But soon after, that smile would be flipped upside down. Little did he know, the league would be taking a closer look at the situation. As you can see, Amar'e Stoudemire, along with Boris Diaw, actually moved away from the bench area, which is not allowed during an altercation, and both would eventually be suspended for 1 game. And of course, this was a huge blow to the Phoenix Suns, as they would need everything in order to beat the Spurs. They had no idea how they were going to be able to replace 2 of their starters. In the days following the suspensions, Amar'e Stoudemire and Boris Diaw both tried to explain that they only left the bench to see if Steve Nash was okay, and that they never even heard of that rule before, but they knew that they weren't going to win this battle.
Well, it's definitely tough to sit out. You know, I've never been suspended before. It's something that never happened, so I'm not quite sure. I don't know how the rules are. I don't know the lingo to it, but I know you can't step on the court. And at that time, it was a natural reaction. I really didn't think about it. I just wanted to make sure Steve was okay, and I got penalized for it.
Even though it was clear that they did break the rules, there were still Suns fans out there that had a hard time accepting the punishment. Some people say that Tim Duncan should have been suspended as well, because he also stepped on the court earlier in the game during a different altercation. And they felt that the league turned a blind eye when Bruce Bowen kneed Steve Nash in the groin. And Amar'e Stoudemire even said that Bowen also tried to injure him by kicking him in the back of the Achilles. It was obvious that the Spurs were the much more dirtier team, but suffered little consequences. I mean, here's Robert Horry throwing a towel in the face of Danny Ainge earlier in his career, which shows you the kind of guy he was. Man, who could do something like that?
Surprise, motherfucker!
Several days after the incident, Jalen Rose said he would have grabbed his teammates and held them back, because he knew that this potentially cost them the series. Heading into Game 5, with the series tied up, yeah, the Spurs had to go without Ori, but Phoenix definitely got the worst of the deal. Even though they were at home, they knew that it would take a valiant effort to get a victory that night. And surprisingly, they almost had them, even without a couple of their key players. It looked like they were on their way to go up 3-2, but towards the end, they just couldn't hang on, as San Antonio won the game by just 3 points.
And San Antonio has won it, 88-85, and I guess you should mail this one to Commissioner David Stern and give him the congratulations on the win.
Then came Game 6, a game the Suns could not afford to lose, or else their season was over. With Amari Stoudemire feeling fresh and ready to get back on the court, he would go off for 38 points. But in the end, it wasn't enough, as the Spurs eliminated the Suns in 6 games. To this day, many people in the Suns organization believe that those crucial suspensions cost them their championship run. And even when the players sit down to talk about that series, they simply describe it as heartbreaking. They truly believe that they would have won the title that year if it wasn't for those unfortunate events that occurred. And of course, many fans were almost certain that something suspicious was going on. And to no surprise, people did not hesitate to throw around the word rigged when it came to that series. And would you look at that?
Just look at that. Just look at that.
Literally last week, former referee Tim Donaghy came out and said that another official actually favored the Spurs and personally wanted them to win the series. He claimed that Tommy Nunes, who was the supervisor of the officials, was not the biggest fan of the Suns owner Robert Sarver, and that he preferred San Antonio to move on to the next round because he enjoyed the lifestyle there. And you guys know the rest of the story. The Spurs ran through the Jazz to advance to the NBA Finals and would eventually sweep a young and inexperienced LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers to win their 4th title. Alright guys, now I want to know your thoughts and opinions about the 2007 Western Conference semifinals. And what was your reaction when you first saw Robert Horry basically throw Steve Nash out of bounds? Make sure to comment down below and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.